There are 4 types of evidence that we discussed when we completed the Evidence of Evolution packet. These all support the theory of evolution. We first looked at similarities in body structures, including bones of a limb. Homologous structures are structures that lead us to believe the organisms evolved from a common ancestor. For example, in the photo below, we can see how all of these species have the same bones, although they may have slightly different shapes or sizes. These would be an example of homologous structures. We also examined embryos. These are the early stages of when a baby develops. DNA sequences are another important piece of evidence that supports the theory of evolution. Lastly, fossils, or the preserved remains of once living organisms, are the final piece of evidence that support our theory of evolution. Using all of the evidence scientists have collected, they are able to create diagrams that show the relationships between species. The following diagram is called a branching tree. In the diagram here, trace the path from the cat to the frog. Now trace the path from the cat to the human. Which path was shorter? The shorter the path, the closer the organisms are related to one another. How do new species form? Natural selection explains how variations can lead to changes in a new species. Variations are simply changes. But how can an entirely new species form? A new species can form when a group of individuals remains isolated from the rest of its species long enough to evolve different traits. Can you think of an example that we talked about in class where Darwin observed a new species forming? Fewer than 1 of every 10 organisms will become a fossil. Most fossils are formed when organisms that die become buried in sediments. Petrified fossils are formed when the remains of an organism are buried in sediment. Then these remains disappear and are replaced by minerals. These minerals harden to form a rock, also known as a petrified fossil. Oftentimes, when a fossil is buried and the sediment hardens, the organism dissolves away, leaving an empty space behind. This empty space is called a mold. A cast is a copy of the shape of an organism made from the mold. There are 2 ways that scientists determine the age of a fossil. The first method is called relative dating. Relative dating compares 2 fossils to figure out which one is older. Relative dating looks at the layers of sediment in the order they have been formed. The deeper the layers, the older the rock and fossils. The fossils found closer to the surface layer are the newest fossils, or also known as the youngest fossils. Here in the picture you can see that as time goes by, the older fossils will be towards the bottom, whereas the newer fossils will be closer to the surface. Fossil is called radioactive dating. The rocks near the fossils contain radioactive elements. These radioactive elements are unstable substances that decay or break down very slowly. Each radioactive element breaks down at a specific speed. Scientists can compare the amount of the radioactive substance remaining to determine the actual age of the fossil. Like pieces in a jigsaw puzzle, fossils can help scientists piece together information about Earth's past. From the fossil record, scientists have learned information about the history of life on Earth. The millions of fossils that scientists have collected are called the fossil record. Almost all of the species preserved as fossils are now extinct. A species becomes extinct if no members of that species are still alive. Most of what scientists know about extinct species is based on the fossil record. In the picture to the left, you can see some of the species that have been discovered and that we believe are extinct. Scientists have calculated the ages of many different fossils and rocks. From this information, scientists have created a calendar of Earth's history that spans more than 4.6 billion years. Scientists have divided this large time span into smaller units called eras and periods. This calendar of Earth's history is sometimes called the geologic time scale.